Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 825. Today we're going to take a look at Nokosu dice, designed by Yusuke Matsumoto and published by EN Games. Now this is published out of Japan, and it is a 10-year-old game. What you're seeing here is the deluxe edition, but I think as of this moment, the deluxe edition is like the only edition that you can get. If you are in the US like me, you're going to have to import it, which has its own issues. But I did check before making this video. Board Game Bliss, which is a Canadian retailer, can bring it in. They will have like a tariff sort of surcharge, I think, on it as well. But the reason I'm talking about this game, I've had this for a couple of years now. And you're just kind of waiting for the right time to sort of talk about it. And now seems like a good enough time. I did check it. It is out there. You can get it, Board Game Bliss, other places, eBay, Board Game Geek, stuff like that. And it does seem to have been like stayed in print. So, you know, as they print it in Japan, and this is the Japanese edition, but it comes with English rules and double-sided player aid cards. So there's English on one side, Japanese on the other. And so it does stay in print and seems to be, you know, somewhat of a small evergreen. And what this is, before preambling all of that to make sure that you know you can possibly get this, this is a trick-taking game, and it uses dice. It's called Nokosu dice. And the dice sort of act as part of your hand of cards. So you have a hand of cards, and you also have sort of a hand of dice. And there's different colored dice, which match the suits of the cards that you get. But they're sort of like publicly visible parts of your hand. So you have some cards, some dice, and then you can play either a die or a card. And you try to win tricks. And it's one of those, you know, trick-taking games with a twist idea, and it's one that a friend of mine who is like really into Japanese imports, he pulls them in like all the time, and we play different ones. We played a lot of great ones, and this has been one of my favorites over the last few years. It plays 3 to 5 players. And let's just go down to the table. It's pretty simple in terms of the mechanics, but it has a ton of interesting stuff. So let's go down and look at it. Then we'll come back and I'll give you my review of it. Okay, so here is all the components and things that you get. And like I said, you get English rules and Japanese rules right in the box. And you have the double-sided player aid cards with English and Japanese on there. And once you get to kind of know the game, everything that you need is right here, because there's just like little tweaks and nuances to how trump works, how tricks work, and the way you score. There's a couple little scoring, not variants, but a couple different ways to score and how you look at scoring at the end of a hand. And you have here, of course, a bunch of cards, different colors, which are different suits with different sets of numbers, 0 to 7 in this case. And so depending on the number of players, you'll deal out a certain number of cards. So you have a hand of cards. And then you're also going to give each player this player board in this case. And I think this is one of the big features of the deluxe edition. So here, this will make some sense, but you'll have sort of your strength of dice, and this gives you a way to kind of organize how the dice work, because that's going to change based on how players draft dice each hand. So we'll explain that here in a second. So again, each player is going to have a hand of cards. They're going to have, let's say, like a hand of dice in front of them. So to start the game, you're going to put some dice in the bag here. And a 3-player game, you might take out some color, one color, but otherwise you're going to use everything. And then you're going to, each player is going to get a certain number of dice. So like in a 4-player game, I think it's 2 dice. So you're going to roll these up, and you're going to have these in front of you in addition to the hand of cards that you get dealt. And then you're going to roll the rest of these out here on the table. Again, number of dice depending on the number of players. And then you're going to take turns drafting dice. So you're going to start putting these in front of you. And then you're going to end up, and I'll explain what these non-numbered black dice are, but you're going to end up with 1 die left. And so that die that's left is going to tell everybody what trump is. So trump is a red 5. Okay, so in that case, the highest card or highest die, if somebody has a red 5, that would be the highest die or card that you can play. So, I think I dealt that, yeah. So if you have the 1 5 red card, in your hand, then of course you have also the highest that way. So the cards don't repeat ever. There's only one of each, you know, suit and number combination, but you could have some repetition based on how these dice come out, like so. And so the player aid gives you a nice way to kind of break this down. It's much easier to tell you this visually. So here's an example trump when the die in the center, the last die that was not drafted, so the die that players did not draft is now the trump. So this is a blue 4. So the highest value card or die is a blue 4. And then it's any 4. So those are kind of like a secondary trump. And then any blues, and you start from highest to lowest. And then anything else is basically the lead color, because you're going to be playing a card or die to lead. And so then of course you have to follow suit. But you know, in that case you just look at the lead, and then it's just the highest numbered card after that. So that's a good way to kind of break it down, and that's a very interesting little wrinkle to the game, because as these dice start to disappear here, then you start to see, okay, what's left? What could end up being the trump situation here? So you go, okay, we have a good chance of purples or reds in this case. So when you go to make that draft choice based on the dice that you already have in front of you, the cards that you already have in your hand, that's going to kind of inform that as well. And that's where these player boards kind of come in. So if I had, let's say this was a red 5 was trump, and I had drafted a red 5 earlier maybe, then I can put that here so we know, okay, that is the full, you've got the full, you know, badass trump. And then maybe you drafted another 5, so any other 5s would go here, and then any other red dice would go here, and then any other dice you would have over there. And so you can use this to kind of help you and help sort of let other players around the table quickly parse, you know, visually what's going on there. So these are a nice little handy addition to this deluxe edition. Now the last little bit here on the draft, you'll notice, okay, there's these 2 black dice that don't have any numbers on it. So instead of taking a dice from the draft pool, you can take and instead discard a dice out of the game and then take one of these. And only 2 people can do this. And what this you are telling people is that you are going to expect to win 0 tricks. So we'll get to scoring in a minute, but if you win 0 tricks and you've taken one of these dice, then you're going to get an additional 10 points. And just very quickly, you always get 1 point for each trick and then any bonus points. And one of the ways to get bonus points is if you take this and get 0 tricks, you get 10 points. So that's the drafting phase. And then the playing card phase is just very, very standard. You know, the first player leads, everybody has to follow, highest of that suit wins unless it's a trump. But again, the trump is a little bit wonky and different in here based on this situation of the die that was left, which this edition has this nice little sort of tray for. And then you just, you know, play out tricks. And so what's going to happen again is you're going to get 1 point per trick that you win. Again, if you chose 0, then you would get 10 points if you actually got 0. If you choose this, obviously, and you score any trick, you don't get the bonus, but at least you get the points for the trick that you won. And then what's going to happen is, as players play cards out of their hand, play dice from out in front of them, they're going to end up with 1 die left. So let's say I ended up with this one here. You never can play whatever your last die is that you drafted or were dealt at the beginning of the round. And what this shows you is the number of tricks that you sort of bid in retrospect. It's almost like a retcon bid, because in some trick-taking games, before you play a single card, you're saying, oh, I'll win 4 or I'll win 2 or whatever. But this is kind of interesting because as you have dice left, let's just take a random example here. So I've got a 1, 2, and a 3 left. So 1, 2, and a 3 there. So as I'm playing my hand, you know, I'm winning or losing tricks. Then I go, well, how many do I think I'm going to end up with at the end? Do I want to play this? Because I feel like, well, I probably will end up with 2 tricks. So I don't want to get rid of that. But that's the right one to play right now. So it's this weird kind of conundrum to sort of balance, like trying to get the bonus there. And so the way that the bonus works, let's say at the end of the round, I win 3 tricks, and the last die that I had was a 3. Well, the player aid tells you how that works, although the wording on this is a little bit tricky, so I'm going to show you the rule book, which is much clearer. It's very simple, but it's like hard to explain. It's much easier to show. So let's say you're playing in a 4-player game or a 5-player game, and 4 players are eligible for the bonus. So 4 of us match the number of tricks we had to whatever the die was showing. So in that case, Where are we? Nobody gets any extra points. But let's say 3 players did it. 3 players hit their bonus. Everybody would get 10 points. Let's say 2 players hit their bonus. 20 points. And then if only 1 player hit their bonus, they will get an additional 30 points. And of course, again, this has nothing to do with that. This is a separate thing. So you'll score 10 points if you got 0 tricks. So that's what the bonus is. If you're the only one to do it, you're going to get 30 points. If a couple of you do it, 20 points, down to 10, down to 0. So that's the way you score points, either off your bonus dice or off your 0 die, and then plus the number of tricks that you actually took. And then you're just going to play hands equal to the number of players. So if you're playing a 3-player game, you play 3 hands. 4-player game, 4. 5-player game, 5. And that is the game. Okay, so that is Nokosu dice. We'll just do my pillars of review. Player count, it plays 3, 4, or 5 players. I don't really have a preference, honestly. I think it kind of works fine at all the player counts. Obviously, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more chaotic with 5 players. The thing is I'll talk more about this in a second, but the whole dice drafting and the whole like kind of deciding at the last minute what your bonus is going to be, instead of bidding at the beginning of the trick, you're sort of bidding at the end in a way, which I'll talk more about in a second. That to me is a more of a driving force than a number of players, because you're always kind of like trying to adapt to like what's happening. Even during the draft, you're like, okay, that what's in my hand? What's this? So the chaoticness of 5 is not really that much different than the chaoticness of it's like a 3-player game. So I honestly don't have a preference. I've honestly really enjoyed it with that. Now the box says 45 to 60 minutes, which feels long to me. I played it several times over the last, I've had it for like 2 years. Yeah, I don't remember a game ever taking an hour, ever, even with 5 people. It goes pretty quick. Like it's a little bit sort of, there's like a sort of a minor mental backflip. Very, very minor, I think, when you explain how scoring works and stuff. But everybody, after you play like 1 hand, everybody's like, oh, okay. And then off you go. And you don't really play that many hands. You know, if you play with 5 players, it's just 5 hands, but it goes fast. So I don't think it's going to take an hour. At the most, it would take an hour for a full game. But I don't think it would ever get that high. Now, okay, as far as my last pillar goes, you know, what is this game like? Obviously, there's a lot of trick-taking games. Kind of all the rage lately has been these cooperative ones, like The Crew and the new Lord of the Rings games and stuff like that. Not so much the competitive ones. But, you know, there are a lot of trick-taking games that come out of Japan and Korea. And so we play quite a few with my group. Like I said at the beginning, I have one friend he really likes 18xx games, and he really likes, you know, small trick-taking games that just have like, you know, some like little weird quirk and some kind of interesting thing to sort of just, you know, kind of tease you mentally and that kind of thing. And he brings a lot of them to the different game nights and the game days and stuff like that. And most of the time they're, you know, decent. At least they're fun. They're pretty good. I would say this has been one of my favorite. And like I said, I went and picked it up a couple years ago. I got like the last one at the time. I don't remember the thing. It's like, you know, it's like a Japanese importer website. There's a few of those for board games and Gundams and Game Boys and stuff like that. And so I got one then, but I've seen it kind of stay in print as well. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. It kind of comes around. So maybe it's worth sharing with people. And like I said, I think this is one of my favorites. And the reason for that is, which I talked to about 2 minutes ago, is the dice part of it. Now, it's interesting because, like I said in the walkthrough, when you are seeing those dice pulled and taken, it's like always sort of evolving, like what you think people have and that kind of thing. Because one major part of trick-taking games is sort of watching what people play, you know, when they run out of a certain color, when they might start pivoting and playing a bunch of trump cards, that kind of thing. But this is cool because that all happens before the hand even starts. At the beginning of the game, you can see that, and you have like a couple of public dice usually at the beginning, depending on the player count. You have a different number of them, and so that gives you everybody information. So it's like everybody's sort of parsing all this stuff right from the beginning, and that's really neat. And then what's cool, at the end of the draft, when you start to see the dice go down, you're like, oh, what is Trump going to be? Because you don't know what Trump's going to be at the beginning. So you might sort of draft to play with that. So the thing is let's say you have a lot of blue cards and you're like, well, should I take blue dice? Because if blue is trump, I have a lot of trump. But if I take all the blue dice, there's no more blue dice in the thing. Blue will never be trump because it's always the last die that's left. So you have to like sort of cat and mouse it a little bit and be like, yeah, I don't really want that, you know. So there's like some sort of, at least the impression of bluffing and gamesmanship there. You know, I don't want to overstate it, right? Because it is pretty quick and simple, but and it's, you know, there's not a ton of dice, so it doesn't really, like, you can't really be super crafty, but you know, you can try to play. The thing is, you have to try to play kind of multiple angles. You can't just like commit, be like, I'm going for blue to be trump. But like, well, you can't commit too much to one thing. You've got to sort of play maybe one or two possibilities. But that whole evolving thing, like what's trump going to be at the end, is really, really neat. And then on the flip side of that, when you actually play the hand, and then you're worried about like, oh, I want to get the bonus points. And so then you're like second guessing which dice to play because you want to hit it exactly with the last die that you have. And that is just interesting because it's just, you're constantly like thinking on your feet and sort of changing strategy and trying to leave yourself options when you don't want to like close yourself down. And it reminds me of some of these older games. There's a Bruno Feduti one, Dwarf King, and then there's a Seiji Kanai one, which was called Chronicle. And they kind of achieve a similar thing with like different special abilities and powers and that kind of stuff. And we saw last year with Origin Story, where you have like, you know, always like the table basically flipping every round. And you're like, oh no, everything's different, you know. And this is a similar thing, but it's a little bit more, it, you know, does it without any special abilities. Not that one is worse or better than the other. It's just a different way to do it. And so, but that's neat, you know, because if you like that kind of game where it's like, you know, you just getting hit from left side and right side, you know, and things are just changing. You like to be tactical, and keep your options open. This kind of gameplay really lends itself to do that without kind of the overhead of, you know, a lot of special abilities and that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's probably a little bit drier too than that. So there's you kind of give and take with that situation. But yeah, I really enjoy it, and I definitely recommend it. And you can get it. I know there's not a ton of copies floating around right now, but you can go and get it, and it does sort of come back in. So if they run out of copies here, however, you know, in a month or 2 months or however long the supply lasts, then you know, there'll probably be more copies to be had down the road. And like I said at the beginning, it plays well 3, 4, and 5. So it's not a very player count specific thing. You don't have to worry too much about that, in my opinion. So anyway, that is Nokosu Dice. Have a look. Thanks.